So we'll just wait a quick minute, let other people jump on. Okay, we'll get started now. Hi, I'm Heather Ducharme of the Downtown Alliance. I'm the Director of Storefront Business Engagement, and today we're doing a webinar with our partner Streetsense on getting your retail establishment ready for the upcoming months as we navigate this pandemic. Streetsense is a firm with decades of experience in design and hospitality, as well as research analysis and various other industries. I just have a couple things to say before we officially begin. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the video will be sent on Monday for this video to everyone who signed up. Regarding Q&A, during the webinar, if you have any questions, you can submit them via the Q&A feature. If you are using a desktop or a laptop, this is usually located at the bottom of the screen. And for those of you who are on an iPad, tablet, or phone, you can tap once and it should appear on the top right corner. We'll also be sharing helpful links to resources, websites, and other detailed information throughout the program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay and Alex, who are with Streetsense and will be doing this presentation.
Heather, thank you so much. And we appreciate the opportunity to partner with the Downtown Alliance to develop this retail recovery toolkit. Our team is from a creative consultancy in Washington, D.C. called Streetsense. We have research and analysis, an entire retail division, and we are partnered with CBRE, one of the largest real estate and retail brokers in the United States. And we've leveraged a lot of the analytics for this and a lot of their strategies for helping businesses through this really unprecedented time. Joining me today is Alex Barrow, our senior project manager and creative director for the Eat and Drink Studio at Streetsense. And also one of the key architects of this presentation is Larissa Ortiz, the managing director of our research and analysis in New York City. And so we're delighted to be able to share this with you, and let's jump right in. So today, what we wanted to talk about is there is a robust set of tools that we have developed for retailers that are struggling with the pandemic. We wanted to go over the tool today. We wanted to talk a little bit about where are we with the New York Forward initiative? What does that mean? How can we appropriately respond to that? And what's next for retailers in downtown Manhattan and in the business improvement district here? We'll talk a little bit about capital management, really the key to success for surviving this pandemic for many retailers. We'll talk about tools and resources and other opportunities for additional capital that exist out there even today. Lots of government and non-government opportunities still exist. We'll talk a little bit about examples of changing the operating model of many retail businesses to survive and adapt to the pandemic and what people have done to modify their business model to create cash flow and to create more revenue streams and all of that. We'll talk about easy progression of shifting into digital or enhancing your digital experience or your e-commerce platform as people are staying at home and stuck in front of the computer like many of you are right now. The ability to sell on an e-commerce platform has gone up exponentially, and the sales have jumped significantly. This was already a trend. We'll talk about easy step-by-step ways to improve what you've got and take the next step with your e-commerce platform. And then we'll talk about the business adjustments required by the New York Forward Initiative, and things that retail businesses have to do. And we'll spend a little bit of time separating out what a consumer goods business would be, such as a clothing retailer or a store such as that, or personal care businesses like a barbershop or a salon, or a spa. The difference between those and how the New York Forward requirements affect them. And then we'll end with a little Q&A and go from there. So I think Alex is going to talk a little bit about where we are with New York Forward now.
Sure. Thanks, Jay, and thanks to the Downtown Alliance for having us. We're really excited to be partnering with them to work on this, as well as making the toolkit available for everyone and scheduling individual one-on-one sessions to review any part of this plan, the toolkit, or steps you can take to improve your business during the pandemic. So where we are today is that New York City entered phase 1 on June 8th. And phase 4 is where we are right now for reopening, as with all 9 other regions in the States. What that means is, with some exceptions, like large malls that still remain closed in New York City until a determined date, that retail and personal care establishments can now operate, but at a limited capacity. So at 50% occupancy for now. Also meaning we have to have social distancing and enhanced sanitation practices in place. And something that the New York Forward Plan requires every business to have. So if you haven't done yet, we'll review how to do it today, as well as what you need to do to get it done, is to have a written plan that outlines the actions taken to fight the pandemic and the spread of the pandemic, and what you're doing to keep your customers safe. That's required to be on hand. And it's relatively simple to fill out, and we'll go through the measures you need to address as to filling out that plan and getting that ready. And finally, we'd like to remind everybody to download the full toolkit from the Downtown Alliance. And if you're interested, schedule a session with us to go over all of the things we go over today in detail as they relate to your business, as well as reviewing where you stand with your pandemic recovery strategy to make sure that you are set up for success in the future.
So the first step really in working with a toolkit, the way that we've set it up is we start with a self-assessment. And this is a very easy to use guide that allows you to go through the different aspects of your business and understand what you may have been prepared for, what you've already handled, and then what areas that you may not have touched yet or may need further consideration. We follow that up with a capital management module, some talk about the operating module, and the business adjustment. But the self-assessment is really a very easy to use online form. And the thing that we found with businesses that are actually thriving or growing during the pandemic is that they have viewed their business as a startup, a 100% startup, even if they've been in business for many years. How you make money during a pandemic and after the pandemic may be completely different from how you make money prior to. And so just not holding on to the desire to be what you were before is often the way to move forward, to find new revenue streams, and to find a way out of this. And quite honestly, we've never seen a single silver bullet. Everybody talks about going online or e-commerce as a really important thing to do, and it is really important, but it may not be the only thing or even the best thing for your business to do. So by doing the self-assessment, you get a real clear understanding of where your business is, what you've considered, what you may not have, and we encourage everyone to do it. And then it's an easy 10-minute online tool. And then based on that, the tools and resources in the guide are available just to flip right to or skip if you've already got it covered. Alex?
The first section we're going to cover is a little bit about capital management. We're going to stay at a pretty high level here just because it is unique to every business, and there are so many resources available out there, especially in our toolkit, to help you with this. But we wanted to really help give you some themes on how to navigate this capital management crisis that a lot of you may be going through. And first and foremost, as Jay said, is to treat your business as a startup. Part of being a startup also means being very critical about what you're spending and understanding what your revenues are and planning for the future. So the first step you can take is understanding how much capital you may need, then seeking out additional funding if more funding is needed to keep your business afloat and alive and you wish to do so, and then reducing expenses wherever possible. to ultimately fiercely protect your capital and make sure that you have the funds you need to continue to operate. So the first step in understanding that is knowing how much reserve capital you're going to need by evaluating what's called your burn rate. And this is a little bit business 101. A lot of retailers know how to do this and do this regularly, but it's important to do so with an analytical mind, with pen and paper, and to do this on a regular basis to make sure that you're achieving where you think you are, so you can be honest and evaluating the needs of your business as you go through such a difficult time of revenue shortages. So your burn rate is the difference between how much money you're taking in and how much money it costs to keep you afloat through hard expenses. The second number to understand with that burn rate is your cash runway. So for example, if you have $50,000 per month that it costs you to operate in expenses, inventory, rent, and other operating expenses, and you're only bringing in $45,000, your burn rate is $5,000 per month. What that means is you're going to need a cash runway larger than that. And however large your cash runway is from a capital windfall, either from a previous order that was fulfilled, a large purchase order that gives you some cash on hand, a loan or additional funding that came in. If you have $50,000 for that $5,000 run rate, you've got 10 months to operate. So understanding those two things helps you understand and plan your cash flow, plan your expenses, your major repurchases, and purchasing your inventory levels, as well as how much money you're going to need to operate for how long of a time to be able to get through a crisis like this, as well as hopefully preserve some additional capital for any additional second wave.
Alex, I think it's important to say now that when we first started this pandemic, I think that there was a belief that we would have 3 months of pain and suffering, and then we would be able to get slowly back to business and arc upward. Given the way that the pandemic has rolled out in the United States and the countermeasures taken by different municipalities and in different government agencies, we are seeing this being a crisis of ebbing and flowing, criticality between now and when there's a vaccine. So we don't believe that there's going to be a material improvement in the business environment until probably spring or maybe early summer of next year. So the ability to survive between now and let's say next April or May is going to be critical. So when you think about cash, think about what happens if there's another wave, what happens when it gets cold and we add the flu to this. Thinking about this as more than a 3 or 4 month or a summer long thing, thinking about it as a long-term issue that will last through the next couple of cycles, next couple of seasons is really important to understand.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. And that's really helpful to keep in mind. And that leads us to our next point is that as harrowing as that sounds and as difficult as that sounds to navigate, a combination of reduction in expenses and seeking out additional capital where available is the best way to combat that in order to keep in business and to keep alive, to be able to return to those levels of revenue in the distant future. So in talking about sources of capital, a lot of you are struggling with that. And there have been some federal sources of capital. There have also been some New York specific programs that have launched, which is the New York Forward Loan Program, where you can access additional lines of credit that have favorable terms. Sometimes the repayments don't start for a year, for 2 years, or they have generous forgiveness plans, as some of the federal plans do. And what we've done is we've collected all of those. The Downtown Alliance has activated a running list of all of those different funding mechanisms that are available to your business and put them in one place. And we've got those available to you on the toolkit, so you can navigate and peruse. And if additional funding is needed to get you through until the full recovery, you can look and see what your what applies to you and what's applicable to your business, and apply for additional funding if it's needed. So from an expense side, we wanted to talk a little bit about inventory management. And our toolkit will have additional information on how to activate some of these strategies, but at a very high level, it's critical to reduce inventory levels at this time. And that's not just a reduction in the back and in the storeroom and in purchases and orders and due to reduced revenues, but also in the front and readjusting people's expectations. Before the pandemic, it was very much an expectation for many consumers that they walk into a store, a consumer goods store, or even a salon or personal care industry, and it was stocked to the gills with items for them to purchase and peruse at their leisure. Now that's changed a little bit, and we expect consumers' demands and habits to change as well, and that it might be prudent, if not if not more safe and sanitary, to have less merchandise available both on the shelves, but also in the stockroom, as well as cycling that inventory a little less often so that you don't have to make repurchases every season so you can survive through this. Something else that we're advocating people to do is take a hard look at their discounts, comps, any marketing strategies that they have that are discounting things down to get rid of inventory, and make sure they're working for you, and reevaluate your business now to make sure that what you were doing pre-pandemic and during the pandemic makes sense to generate the capital you're going to need and the revenue you're going to need when you sell those to be able to get to the next phase of this recovery.
Alex, I wanted to mention at this point that, according to the Small Business Association, there's only of very small businesses, only about 22% have a really a digital inventory management system. And the reduction of your inventory or unnecessary inventory can lower your overhead and operating costs by 15 to 30%. So inventory management, in a pandemic or in a crisis is critical. So getting good at it now and thinking through it now is really the way to go.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. And of course, the number one expense for most businesses, especially in Manhattan, is going to be rent and occupancy. So what we've done is, with our partners at CBRE, who are retail and commercial lease brokers, we've put together some strategies that we're seeing out there as to how people are partnering with their landlord to be able to tackle some of the shortfalls that we're seeing in being able to pay rent and occupancy. These are real strategies out there, and these are things that you can have as a dialogue with your landlord to see if they're amenable to as we navigate this crisis. It's important to remember that it's not in your landlord's interest to lose a tenant either. And they understand the breadth and width of this crisis and are going through it themselves. So having a plan and a solution for both of you to navigate out so they have a tenant at the end of the road and that you have a location at the end of the road is in everybody's best interest. There will be, of course, landlords who don't want to negotiate and who don't want to make adjustments, but it's important that you have an open dialogue with them, present options and opportunities to be able to continue to pay some or additional rent at the end of a term to be able to navigate this crisis together. So some of the strategies that we're seeing out there are short-term rent deferrals. So a quick 30 to 90-day pause on rent and negotiating that when rent returns, how it's reapplied in the loan. Rent reductions in the short term, talking about how much you can pay and what percentage of your rent you're able to give to the landlord at this time if you do have some revenue coming in the till. Some landlords have been offering free rent with a lease extension. So what that means is a period of time of rent, a block of months can be then added on to the end of the term of the lease so that you can continue your lease, pause your rent, but the landlord's going to be recouping that money at the end of the lease, so it becomes a little bit longer. That also can come with a negotiated termination, so you can renegotiate the terms of your lease by redoing a new lease contract with your landlord and also using that to buy some time during that pandemic. And one of the more interesting strategies we're seeing is a percentage rent, where you negotiate a percentage of your revenue that goes to the landlord for an interim basis as you recover together from this pandemic, so that you're only paying something that your business can handle as a percentage of revenue and not over that as revenues has declined.
Yeah, I mean, those are all really important strategies from landlord management. The other important thing to think of, as we mentioned earlier, is if you think about your business as a startup, what are interesting and creative ways that you can adjust your business, pivot your business to get cash flow? And the key is to move the needle, to generate money, to generate revenue in any way you can, and by thinking about your business as a space that will have additional opportunities to make money in a variety of different ways. So here are some examples that we've seen in the market that we think are great. Restaurants have and bars have converted to grocery stores during the pandemic, and curbside pickup. There was a wonderful article in the Times this week about a restaurant or a bar owner in Brooklyn who said it was heartbreaking to lose his bar, but the profit margins that he's making and the ability to generate money and the ability to rehire his staff came from converting his bar into a neighborhood grocery with curbside pickup and different ways to generate revenue through meats and cheeses and specialty goods coming out of the front door of his establishment. And he's making more money than he did before the pandemic. It was a sad but great article. DIY kits, things that we're seeing quite a few of these in the market where you create a little kit that people can use at home. Joann's craft stores realized that during the shortage, there was a shortage of PPE, masks and aprons for hospital workers, and they created sewing templates with additional sort of fabric available that was appropriate for these kinds of things. And people began to buy that from them and create extra PPE for hospitals and pharmacies and public spaces that they were able to sell themselves. And so it was a win-win for everyone. Live streaming services, a lot of personal care providers are doing webinars and beauty tips and how-tos and how to use certain skincare products and what a daily facial regimen might be. So there's a way to use your social channels and Facebook Live and Instagram and all to do live streaming introductions to your product, and then sell kits that people can go home and watch these little bits of information from you and use and continue to generate revenue that way. And then, emergent has recently, amped up their shelf-stable products that you can use when you go camping. And these things were something that a lot of people bought because they were worried about the food supply. So they were able to create a new revenue stream with this shelf-stable grocery. The other thing that is important for small businesses to think about is digital. It's very clear that retail is going digital. Even for all bricks and mortar stores, the retail has gone that way. It was a trend before the pandemic. It will be a trend after the pandemic, and the pandemic has actually amped up the speed at which this is taking over. People who were previously uncomfortable with shopping online for groceries or for clothing or for shoes or for personal products now do it because they have to. So the door has been kicked wide open, and it's really good to respond. And now more than ever, it's a time to ramp up your e-commerce platform. Now, e-commerce isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. We're aware of that. And so we have set up really what we're calling the digital continuum for small businesses. And what that means is, you start with just brick and mortar. Maybe you have a website that has your name and location, but you're essentially a traditional retail business. Then we are recommending that you really make sure that your digital footprint and your business is listed appropriately in all of the free services, and that you're monitoring things like your Yelp reviews and things like that, and that your personality on the web is as up to date and as positive as you can make it. Then we're transitioning into social media, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Once you have your social media channels and you have a following, there's an opportunity now through new products from Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and others to turn your followers into an e-commerce platform and sell through these channels in a very creative way. We go into partnered e-commerce, which means Amazon, Etsy, things like that. A lot of guides and tools in the kit for that. And then we talk about what does it mean for you and when should you have an individual e-commerce platform. So I want to walk through this a little bit because I think it's worth talking about, sort of step by step on the digital front. For small businesses, there are lots of things you can do to make sure that your business shows up in search that are free, that don't cost anything. And the first is Google My Business. If that profile isn't up to speed and up to date, that's the first thing you should do. Looking on social media for reviews and looking under Yelp and under TripAdvisor for the hotel set. But looking at your reviews and making sure that there's nothing negative or as little negative as possible, and that the reviews are fair. And you can respond to these, and you can work with Yelp to get unfair reviews off, and just responding to them online is really a step up. We have found that, and surveys have shown that going from a 2 to a 3-star review is a lot of money and a 15% pickup in business. So it's important to know that your digital reputation does generate sales, and managing that now's the time to do that. Updating your photography on your website, looking at your SEO, your search engine optimization, making sure that's up to speed, adding pandemic appropriate search words and search criteria to your site is really important. And just making sure it's as easy as possible to do business with you digitally. Now, this doesn't cost anything. These are things that very often businesses miss. They're just not listed on Google in the right way, or their search engine is out of date. So that's important to look at. The next step is social media. As I mentioned, now is the time, if you don't have a social media channel, to develop one. But those of you who do have a social media, making sure that you're adding appropriate content that reminds people how much they love your business, that is getting out your message, what you're selling, when you're open, what you're doing. Social media is a very inexpensive and very effective tool for businesses to use to grow their base and their following. And it also can be translated almost immediately into social commerce, which is the next step. So once you have a following, translating your social media following into social commerce is really an easy step. There, we've got some links in the guide that will take you to Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook's new social commerce platforms. And so on Instagram, you can have a little short video that shows you unpacking a little DIY home kit. And then when someone clicks on a link, it can automatically link to your website or your e-commerce platform, or develop a standalone e-commerce platform with Instagram or Facebook that will allow you to generate revenue and do online sales from that video. So these are very innovative tools. They're very new. They're rolling out right now. And they're sort of fascinating in ways to take this organic following that people have on social media and turn it into a way for them to interact with your business and buy things from you. Now, if you can only do one, Facebook and Instagram are linked, and it's the same platform and it's the same back end. So we would recommend looking at that first, but there's a lot of them depending on what kind of business that you run. Next is, a lot of businesses may have some, they're selling through their website and they're wondering, well, should I get in bed with Amazon or an Etsy or an eBay, or what does that do? Now, there are fees to this, but the fees come with amazing amount of eyeballs and amazing amount of marketing. I think that Amazon owns about 1/3 of all digital retail sales in the world. So that's an enormous amount of eyeballs. So, at the right time, if this is the next step for your business, we have some, ideas and tools in the toolkit about getting on with partnered e-commerce and some of the risks and some of the benefits. And then finally, how do you set up your own e-commerce platform, and what is the right time to do that? So maybe you've been working with eBay or with Etsy, and now it's time to have your own channels. If you have a strong following, if you have a loyal following, if you have a strong social media presence, and if people love you, and you've been working with Etsy, or you're working with eBay, you're working with Amazon, it may be time to translate those people to your own channel. And there are very low cost and very efficient technology platforms that help you do that. They look great, they're easy to use, and again, they generate unimpeded sales. And so rather than playing around with Etsy or eBay and spending another 15-20% on all of your purchases and giving that away, this is a channel that you can do, and you can make that money yourself. And finally, there's other business pandemic strategies that exist that include the subscription model, shopping by appointment, curbside pickup. These are all outlined in the toolkit, and are all great ways to, again, enhance your business and your online sales. A subscription model is something like Rent the Runway. I know that a lot of their brick and mortar stores have just closed, but the idea of having a little monthly subscription that comes, and developing that and keeping that fresh is something that people are making a lot of money on now. And then the appointment shopping is another great digital strategy, so that you can take online appointments and shop by appointment, and people can come into your store and not feel that they are going to encounter too many other people. And then curbside pickup, there's a lot of strategies and outline on how to do that. Alex?
Yeah, so thanks, Jay, for that. I think it's really critical to remember that Things that you may be doing now, you can amplify and do better. And things that are available to you that felt far away before need to be re-examined as you treat your business like a startup and think about how to recapitalize and re-emerge from this crisis, and thinking about what strategies you can take both in the digital sphere and in the physical realm, which we're going to cover in a minute, to be able to again, rethink how your revenue is coming into your business and making sure you're maximizing on that, and not try to wait for the return to normal, which may not be coming for quite some time and may not ever return to exactly what it was before. So with that, we wanted to get into some business adjustments that your business, depending on its type, will need to take, and some strategies that businesses are taking to be able to adapt to this new normal. What we've done is we've taken the New York Forward guidelines and applied them to an example business, as well as introduced some other interventions that we think will help guests feel more comfortable coming into your retail establishment, perhaps be willing to spend more time and more money within your retail establishment, and making small adjustments that don't require a lot of infrastructure, but that can help prepare you to be open and operating during the pandemic as we continue to search for that vaccine. So it's about thinking about those simple interventions and how you can modify your business. So we're going to go through these on a floor plan quickly. So on the top, you'll see an example clothing retailer before the pandemic. They've got a centralized clothes display, a waiting area in front of their fitting rooms, densely packed retail shelves, and showcase retail. And what we've done is, one, created an exterior queuing system. You can't have as many people in your business as before. And in fact, there's an occupancy limit imposed upon you, so you have to be able to regulate that. So creating a queuing system can allow people to comfortably enter and exit in a controlled manner, and using some floor decals can help with mitigating that. So second, we're advocating for single entry and exit, as well as marking the floor to make sure that people understand how to flow throughout the space. Something we see as critical is easy to add is an upgrade to is adding sanitation stations at entry, at exit, and close to checkout area, so that people feel comfortable, can sanitize their hands as they come in. It shows an attention to detail and an ability for people to be clean, sanitary, and safe as they enter your establishment and browse the goods. So a critical intervention here is we've removed the waiting area in front of the fitting rooms to allow some more space and not encourage people to congregate, or give them a place to congregate, so that people are there purposely browsing the merchandise and not there waiting and congregating in front of a fitting room or waiting for another patron, so that people are going in to shop and to purchase. Fitting room capacities are reduced. A lot of retailers are taking all of their fitting rooms out of service, or only having one operational or one or two, so that they can cycle through and sanitize those after every use, so that people feel comfortable trying on merchandise. Something else we've done is take the checkout line and examine how you social distance that, and make sure you're applying clear social distancing markers to make sure that people feel comfortable checking out and purchasing goods from your establishment without creating too much of a crowd in a tight space. So thinking through, how do people flow through my space? Where's the best place for them to queue? It may not be where it was before. And how do I ensure that I'm enforcing social distancing through signage to make sure that people comfortably line up to purchase equipment and goods? Something that we're seeing in a lot of retailers, which is a low-cost strategy to provide an additional protection and barrier, is a plexiglass barrier on your checkout, so that people can do the one required face-to-face contact during this pandemic without feeling like they're threatened or having to come too close to another member of your staff. Something we're seeing people install and think about is touchless payments. It's a really low friction way to ensure that you're adhering to the pandemic requirements, as well as reducing the amount of contact required for any individual purchase. And again, making people feel comfortable being in your business, interacting with your business, and ultimately purchasing your merchandise inside your business. And finally, those sanitation stations again at checkout. So there are some core requirements that you have to enforce as a business and business owner and operator in New York, as a consumer goods business operator. In the guide, we've got links to the full guidance from New York Forward, but it's broken down into a few key sections that can help you understand the gist of everything you need to do and to modify to continue to operate during the pandemic. And very briefly, it's about social distancing. It's reducing your capacity to 50%, mandated for now. And introducing ways to be able to have protective equipment for everybody. So if that's giving out PPE to your customers at the door in a higher end business, or just ensuring and making sure that people are wearing masks as they enter, as well as making sure all employees wear masks for all shifts. There's enhanced sanitation and hygiene. The procedures are relatively straightforward, and we'll go through a few of them that will help you understand how to enact them. Communication is another critical point for the New York Forward Plan. It means signage posted inside and outside of the establishment that reminds both staff and customers to adhere to the proper procedures that are in place, both social distancing, hygiene, safety, and cleaning. And finally, screening. New York Forward requires you to screen your employees either through a questionnaire, over the phone before they come into work, at the start of their shift, or a combination of both, or through temperature checks to ensure that your employees are not carrying the virus, aren't expressing symptoms of the virus, and haven't had any contact with anybody that has, so that you can preempt having a sick employee come to work and make sure that your workforce is protecting the general public as they come to work.
Yeah, Alex, one of the things to keep in mind when we talk about screening is that it can be an HR issue if done incorrectly. So we've really outlined the details of that and talked through, in the guide, the things that you have to do to be HR compliant. You are required to do it as a New York business, but how you do it is everything. And then once someone gets sick, what you do then is really, really important. So
yeah, and we have a little information at the end of this as to kind of everybody's nightmare scenario. What happens if somebody gets sick or one of my employees gets sick? What do I have to do as we're operating during this pandemic? And we'll get into a few of the steps needing to take now, but we'll also in the toolkit have a very clear step-by-step guide of how to do that. So in thinking about how to modify your business, there are a few key interventions that a consumer goods retailer can take. One we talked about as a benefit for capital management, but it's also a benefit for safety and sanitation, which is reducing your merchandising density. That means not having as much stuff out on the shelves, so it's easier to navigate. You can create more distance and a safer feeling environment, as well as protect social distancing measures to keep people 6 feet away from each other. Second is introducing merchandising separators when that distance isn't possible to create. So in thinking about different layouts of retail merchandise, if there's a way to, in a back-to-back scenario, introduce a physical barrier so that you can have people flow throughout the space seamlessly without having to interrupt the general flow of your retail establishment. As we talked about, reducing inventory levels and protecting your stockroom. Very often people have small, tiny closet-sized stockrooms, making sure that you have a one-in, one-out policy. You designate a single employee to go back and forth between those, so there's not people congregating, especially employees, in smaller areas. We talked a little bit about fitting rooms, but again, a lot of retailers are closing their fitting rooms altogether. If that works with your chosen demographic, that's a possibility. If you wish to keep them open, there are guidelines both in the New York Forward Plan as well as here as how to do that. But the general consensus is it has to be cleaned and sanitized after every use. So make sure that however many you are keeping open and activated, one, they allow for social distancing. Two, you don't have to have too much proximate contact to get into one, so it doesn't require you to pass by somebody standing in front of you within 6 feet, but can be easily sort of self-serviced. And then that after the customer is finished, you can quickly and expertly clean and sanitize that location to prepare it for the next guest. So if that's one or two, that allows you to be able to do that, you can keep those open, but you do have to make sure you clean and sanitize after every guest. Yeah. In terms of adjusting people.
Alex, another logistical concern that we should bring up on the fitting rooms is the merchandise has to be sanitized as well. And so collecting that and having a way to, once it's tried on, you don't know if the person who tried it on has been infected. So how do you make sure that that is safe before putting it back on the shelf? And there's guidelines on how to do that as well.
Yeah, and there's also guidelines too on general laundering and other items you need to adjust in your procedures from a safety and sanitation perspective, and the best practices in both waste, laundering, and also merchandise. So for people, it's about controlling access, especially with a limited occupancy, and that can come in a number of ways. It can come through exterior queuing and having a controlled access point. Grocery retailers have gotten really good at this, so use them as cues as to how to do this really well. There's some really simple interventions you can do, like counting the number of people in your store if it's small enough to see them all at one time. But very often people are implementing a one-in, one-out policy where parties don't enter until somebody exits, and you create a a bidirectional flow there so that you can have entry and exit be as separated as possible. So thinking about ways to count the number of people, monitor your foot traffic, and again, having a staff member be responsible for controlling the flow of people in and out of the store is the best way to make sure you're protecting those social distancing measures and making sure people are feeling safe when they're entering your establishment to buy. Again, establishing that traffic flow is critical to make sure that you understand how people will interact with your space and make interventions when that interrupts social distancing or interrupts people's comfort level to be able to shop within your space. A couple of other critical areas before I turn things over to Jay to go over how this works in a personal care industry, which is a little bit different, is thinking about your checkout really critically and making sure that you're leveraging partitions if necessary, or leveraging a queuing system that may be different than before, and making sure that you have the appropriate amount of space for people to feel comfortable buying and checking out of your establishment. And that may mean establishing a cash wrap so that there's no direct face-to-face contact without a plexiglass barrier. And again, we mentioned touchless payment and applying that. Something that Jay mentioned earlier in his potential digital strategy, and something that may work for higher end retailers or for people that have specialized merchandise, is to create a retail appointment system. It can feel very bespoke if you have a retail appointment, whether it's a small window of your operating hours for the day for people that are vulnerable, or something that feels like a little more protected for a high-end consumer. Creating retail appointments can allow people to pick the time that they're coming in to shop, show up, arrive, be the only ones in there or one of a few select people in there that are in a controlled manner, and probably increase their likelihood to purchase something if they're making an appointment and making a commitment to come to your establishment at a given time. We've given a few resources on how to start that and turn that on. It can also be an attractive way to have people come back who may otherwise not feel comfortable coming back to their regular retail establishments and their regular retail routines. So ensuring that you carve out some space to do that, either for the most vulnerable or for those that are feeling like they need to continue to distance themselves from other people and members of the general public.
So thanks, Alex. Before we get into personal care, I wanted to mention a little bit about enforcing your customers' behavior in your store. And, unfortunately, a lot of these guidelines have been created so that businesses have to take the brunt of the enforcement. And we've got a lot of questions from retailers that we've worked with on, how difficult should I be if someone doesn't really wear a mask? Is that okay? What happens? What do I do if people aren't really complying, if they're half wearing? And our guidance has been, we want people to feel as comfortable in your business as possible, but not requiring your guests to and your customers to comply with the requirements of your business is probably not okay for the rest of your guests and your consumers. So we're saying take a pretty hard line on this and push back. That's why we have a digital signage package that's available to you that you can point to and say, look, this is a requirement for our business. Just in the same way that they have a no shirt, no shoes, no service, we think it's absolutely fine to say no shirts, no shoes, no mask, no service. And I know that's a requirement of the New York Forward guidelines, but we know that there's going to be ornery people who are trying not to do that or doing it halfway. And we think the harder the line you hold on that, the more comfortable everyone else will feel doing business with you. So I just wanted to mention that because I know a lot of this falls on retailers. It's unfair. It shouldn't be that way, but in this world, that's where we are right now. So personal care, as Alex said, slightly different than what it's like for a standard a consumer goods business. Personal care, you're spending a lot more time, and the density has to be much different. And there's ways that you can help people socially distance. And we think a hair salon or a barbershop is really a great example. So one, we've eliminated the waiting area, and we've used that real estate for more stations that are appropriately distanced. And that's a way to recoup a little bit of your revenue generating capacity while still being responsible. People can wait outside or they can come in by appointment. Establishing, for many walk-up businesses, barbershops and salons are a great example. For many walk-up businesses, instituting an appointment scheduler or a digital appointment service is important, or just requiring appointments by the phone is going to be an important way to keep people from milling around waiting and violating all of your social distance guidelines. So you'll see through this, you'll see barriers between hair cuttery stations and barriers between shampoo stations, and minimizing the distance and minimizing really how many people can be in each area. The other thing that we should mention here that's slightly different is restrooms. There are guidelines in the New York Forward plan about how to control the traffic flow in and out of the restrooms, and again, how to sanitize them and clean them after each use. But slightly different from a standard retail operation, these service businesses, require a lot more plexiglass or separation or barriers. So there may be an investment that you need to make up front. And you'll see, through these, we have, the red lines, the little squiggly lines can be either plexiglass barriers that are built into the floor or set up between stations, or even we've seen some retailers hang clear plastic that is easy to spray down and disinfect from floor to ceiling in a relatively inexpensive way. So important to do that. Again, same physical distancing, requiring all of the staff members to have protective equipment. The sanitation and hygiene guidelines are in the New York Forward, and also communication and screening. And as we mentioned before, there's ways to do this right, and there's ways to do this so people get litigious. So just be careful and understand what the guidelines are. And really, for example, for screening, the ADA guidelines are very specific about this. And so we really clearly identified those pitfalls for you in the guide. So we encourage you to spend a minute with that and take a look.
Jay, the one thing I'll add here is with the personal care business, something that New York Forward input here was that the service can't require that either a guest or an employee remove their mask. So that there are some services that can't be offered, including full facials, beard trimmings, and those things. So make sure you read through and see if any of those are applicable to your business, and ensure you're not offering those services for the time being, just to make sure that you're not requiring the removal of masks by either the employee or the guest to be able to perform any particular procedure.
Yeah. The other thing that we should mention, we haven't yet, Alex, is that there's this idea with safety and sanitation called sanitation theater. And that's very prevalent. It's buzzing around the world right now, and people are talking about it. And what it means is not that you don't take sanitation seriously and you're just doing it for fun or for show, but that you are very overt about it. You're very obvious about it. You have what used to be hidden, spraying down the door handles and, cleaning the restrooms and doing all that should have been behind the scenes before. It was something that you didn't want to impede into the guest mind space. Now it's something that people want to see. And so spraying down and disinfecting high touch surfaces and making a show of actually spraying down every seat or chair between each visit. I was in a doctor's office recently and they sprayed and done everything. And I asked the doctor, I said, is this really going to help? And he goes, well, I think so, but it really does make people feel better. And that's what we're in the business of doing. So I think that that's really important to understand, that people have to feel like you're taking care of them with how you're behaving and the sanitation that you do. And it's also important to understand that this is a signal for guests, and they'll spend more money with you if they feel comfortable. We know that consumers coming back into the marketplace in the middle of this pandemic, the number one reason they're choosing businesses right now is because they feel safe. So again, it's important to be overt in what you do and in how you do it. So again, we're talking about for the personal care businesses, the waiting areas, we're not recommending them. We're saying figure out a way. In many cases, you're required in the New York Forward guidelines and other guidelines to actually map out on the outside, where people wait and how they socially distance. And so if you have a business that you're anticipating, whether you're in an indoor sort of retail environment or, on the street level, you may have to put some, areas or stickers outside on the ground or chalk, guideposts to let people know where to wait and how to wait. And then, again, the service approach is going to be very different, from appointments and reservations to just, the personal contact in many service businesses, specifically salons, that was there before really has to be much more distant, much more anticipatory, and much more careful. So really examine all of the ways that you do business, the ways that you personally interact with your customers, and, create a different service model for the pandemic. Is just very different. And then having in-store reminders, just like in any retail business, but really intuitively teaching people how to go from place to place. We've talked about digital payments, very important. The virtual check-in is important. Having plexiglass barriers around your service counters, and as you check out, having touch-free payments. All of the same things apply for these service businesses. But again, there's just a little bit more, thought around the density and, how much space you have and really how many people you're willing to accommodate at any one moment. When we think about salons and personal care businesses, the station placement is very important. And here are some really great examples. As I mentioned, this is the one on the bottom, the image here is a very inexpensive sort of plexiglass thing done on a little clothing rack. And it's not plexiglass, it's actually, it's a sort of a clear plastic sheeting that is cut to size and placed between the two areas. But this is a pretty good example of people being respectful and trying to be as socially distanced as possible while performing these services. Important to disinfect the staff attire and how that's working as well. Safety and sanitation. Again, we've got a lot of resources and tools in our guide about the specifics of this, the use of PPE, the use of safety and sanitation and all this. But one of the things we wanted to mention in this section, because we won't bore you with that right now, but what we wanted to mention was there's a strategy for businesses about what we're calling A shift and B shift. For A shift and B shift businesses, what this means is that you have two separate staffing models that you have. You have a series of people on shift A that don't ever interact with people on shift B. And the reason for that is if someone on shift B comes down with the coronavirus and they've been in close contact with many other people on shift B, then those people will have to quarantine, excuse me, until they get a test or until they get cleared by their doctor, and they will not be available for work. Excuse me. So that means that the people in shift A, we're going to have to take over for the remainder of the time. An important business strategy, the shift A and shift B, we've outlined it in the guide. Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about other safety and sanitation measures?
Sure, yeah. And the guide has a lot of detail on some really basic things. There's so many resources out there. We feel like it's a challenge to know exactly where to turn for exactly which advice. So what we've done is kind of brought everything together and really reminded everybody of the core tenets of safety and sanitation so that you can train your staff and make sure that everybody's up to speed on how to combat the spread of this pandemic as we continue to operate during it. So there's a clear workflow. It's about reducing your capacity to allowable levels, modifying those critical areas as we went through, posting safety signage so that people can navigate throughout the establishment, knowing what the rules of the road are, and of course, training your staff on what the modified procedures are. And we cover all of that in detail and with some really simple step-by-step guides on things like hand washing, using PPE, and we'll get into that. So for the signage, we're developing with the Downtown Alliance a signage package available to all of you, and we'll be sharing those with you shortly. But we've got signs available for all of your needs so that you don't have to go and purchase signage for any individual use except for the design of it is already done for you, so that you can quickly download them, print them, or use your local printer to print ones at a little higher quality, to be able to post throughout your establishment for any and all of your needs, navigating around your establishment, including things like sanitation, checkout, order pickup, requiring masks, occupancy, some posters for front of house and back of house, so that you can have things for your employees as well as for your guests. We try to make it really easy to have all the signs you could need, all the decals you could need, and easily post things throughout your establishment that look professional and designed from the Downtown Alliance. And finally, we wanted to go over, in the guide, we have available a very clear workflow of what to do if somebody should get infected. At a very high level, it's how to communicate with the infected employee and how to make sure that they're not coming to work, and the communication that you need to make expertly with them. What to do about close contact workers and how to address them, and what information you can and can't share with them about what's going on in your establishment and with your employees. And step 3 is workplace cleaning and reopening and having a plan for that. So we go through all of that in detail as a very detailed step-by-step on what to do should somebody become infected in your establishment. And then a couple of other things Jay touched on that you want to take a look at to make sure that you're ready for this and ready for this for the duration is just updating your sick leave guidelines so that nobody ever feels like they have to come to work sick. Implementing that A/B shift structure if you're able to and have an appropriate level of staff to do that. Again, reviewing what to do if an employee should become infected, and putting a recovery plan in place should that happen. So knowing what you would do and what steps you would take and training your staff on what to do that. Something we've got covered in the guide and that's becoming increasingly important as people return indoors is reviewing your HVAC system to make sure that you're preventing airborne spread. There's some really simple interventions you can take to maximize your fresh air percentage. You can talk to your building engineer or talk to your landlord about optimizing those things. Many of you may have already done that, but we'll talk about some really small level things you can do to prevent the spread of that through the air and through your HVAC system. Implementing enhanced laundry procedures, especially for service businesses and for those that have merchandise that needs to be laundered, and making sure you're following the right protocol for that. And as Jay mentioned, zero tolerance for those without masks, and ensuring you're being, unfortunately, the burden is on businesses to enforce that, but that you're both complying, but also making sure that guests feel comfortable in your space, and that those that want to spend their money can do so in a safe way, and enforcing that helps with that.
Yeah. So there's a lot. That was a lot. There was a lot to absorb, and we appreciate you spending the time with us through this. The guide is really designed to really focus on what your needs are, but there's a lot there. There's a lot of resources there, and there's a lot of great thinking and examples of ways that you can help your business make it through this. I know Heather had a question for us, so we want to do a little Q&A. And Heather, thank you again so much for the opportunity to work with the Downtown Alliance on this, but I know you had a question.
Yeah, for people who, don't have online ordering or not online ordering, but like online appointment systems yet, do you guys have any like recommendations of some companies that offer some good platforms for that?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. In the guide, we have direct links to those programs. And as far as best in class, there are ones that are really easy to set up, like Square Appointments. It's something you could set up in the same day, and it's available to all kinds of different providers, not just like salons or personal care. Vagaro is one of the best in class for salons, particularly to be able to schedule out a larger volume of appointments, as well as introduce some of the things that we were talking about, like virtual check-in and invoicing, so that people don't ever have to touch their phone or their credit card while they're there and can just sort of pay as they leave as their service is confirmed. And then we've looked at a couple of others in the guide for you that you can integrate, such as Clover and 7 Rooms that you can take a look at to have simple to use reservation policies. And there are a few more in the retail guide that can help for specific industries like salons and barbershops that have particular needs and have a particular customer management requirements. So we've got those all in there, but those are some of the big ones.
Great. Awesome. So I don't see any more questions. You guys, kind of touched on the landlord stuff. Do you have any, we talked about leases and landlords and the responsiveness. Do you think, if someone's not hearing back from a landlord at all, like they're trying and trying, what do you recommend to them to do?
We see this as a partnership. We can, unfortunately, there are some laws preventing, mid-pandemic evictions and things, but it's pretty Spartan, and some landlords are being inflexible. In general, we have found that landlords understand the situation and are working with as many businesses as possible. But I think what shouldn't happen is businesses should not feel uncomfortable opening up the conversation. Everybody's in the same situation. And by opening up the conversation, the chances of a likely positive outcome really go up exponentially. I think what we're concerned about is businesses just don't pay rent and don't talk to the landlords, and then, it all gets litigious very fast. Mm-hmm. I think if there's a real mutual respect and understanding, it tends to come out in a much more positive way.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much. I think you guys covered a lot. Like we said before, these are online. I put the link in the chat, and we'll also be sending an email link to this as well with this recording. So I want to thank Alex and Jay for doing this presentation. And we will also still have some openings for our one-on-one consultations. There are just a few left. So if you're interested, you can get a more individualized, customized experience with Streetsense to really get that one-on-one attention that your business needs. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks to the Downtown Alliance, and good luck out there, everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.